Welcome back. You're watching Live from Paris on France 24. I'm Laura Cellier. These are the top stories. 58 dead and hundreds wounded following the worst mass shooting in US history. Police say Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock was a psychopath who acted alone. They say there is no evidence he was linked to international terrorist groups. Catalan leaders seek talks with Madrid. This one day after Spanish police used batons and rubber bullets to prevent people from voting in an illegal independence referendum for the northern region. And emotions running high as the brother of a French Algerian who went on a killing spree in the south of France 5 years ago goes on trial here in Paris. Abdelkader Merah is accused of helping his brother Mohammed, who murdered 3 young Jewish children and 4 others. Well, we begin, though, with the deadliest shooting in US history. Police say at least 58 people have died and over 500 have been left injured after a heavily armed man opened fire on crowds at a concert in Las Vegas. He's been named as 64-year-old Nevada local Stephen Paddock. Police have described him as a lone wolf attacker whose motives remain unknown. He reportedly smashed the window of his 32nd floor hotel room and began shooting indiscriminately. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for the attack, but US law enforcement say there is no evidence to support that claim. Julia Seeger has the latest.
The sun is rising on Las Vegas' famous Strip, and the heavy police presence is a reminder of the carnage that took place here just hours ago. The worst mass shooting in U.S. history.
And though we feel such great anger at the senseless murder of our fellow citizens, it is our love that defines us today and always will, forever. In times such as these, I know we are searching for some kind of meaning in the chaos, some kind of light in the darkness. The answers do not come easy.
At around 10 p.m. on Sunday, a country music concert was in full swing when suddenly automatic gunfire. A crowd of 40,000 people, some running, some taking cover, some hit. Law enforcement swarmed the scene, shutting down the city's main strip. They then quickly spotted the shooter on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel and blasted their way into the room. The assailant, identified as 64-year-old local resident Stephen Paddock, killed himself prior to their entry.
As far as his history and background, we haven't completed that part of the investigation yet, but we located numerous firearms within the room that he occupied.
Police say they believe the assailant acted as a lone wolf. 2 of his homes in northern Nevada are being raided to help explain his motive. Meanwhile, the attack was claimed by the Islamic State group, who says Paddock converted to Islam several months ago, an information some U.S. officials deny.
Well, for more on that, I'm joined here in the studio by our international affairs editor, Annette Young. And Annette, I mean, this has got everyone, including law enforcement, stumped. When you look at Stephen Paddock's profile, who he was. I mean, just tell us, what do we know about him at this stage?
That's just it, because he just does not fit the average profile, does he, Laura? I mean, you know, you look back at all those horrific mass shootings in America, and there's one common theme, and they tend to be young men in their 20s at the most, maybe early 30s, but not somebody who's 64, who clearly had a relatively successful career, bought a number of properties. Apparently the one that he currently owns in Nevada is worth in excess of $400,000 US. Owns 2 private planes, we've heard.
A wealthy man, a successful man.
You know, was living in a retirement community with a golf course, several casinos, and a number of swimming pools. It just doesn't add up. And I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, law authorities there are really going to be scratching their heads as to why this particular individual decided to carry out what has turned out to be the country's worst ever mass shooting. And, you know, we know that he was divorced. We knew that he had, or rather we know that he has a companion who at this stage apparently was out of the country in Australia at the time. But many different questions. we also know he's a professional gambler, that he did enjoy gambling. And in just the last couple of hours, it's been released on a couple of websites that his father was a serial bank robber who was dubbed to be a psychopathic individual back in the 1970s. But again, you know, how far does the apple fall for the tree? I mean, to go from that to pick up a series of guns, in fact up to 10 or so, and fire into a crowd like a sniper would in a war zone is indeed truly extraordinary.
A lot more questions than answers at this stage, and we'll see that investigation unfold, I'm sure, over the next few days. But of course, this will spark one of the most bitter and emotional debates in the United States, and that is, of course, about gun control. We know the state of Nevada has some of the laxest gun control laws in all of the United States. Gun control advocates always hope these shootings will change things. The reality is they rarely do.
And I suspect with this current president in power, most likely not, because this is a man who's come to power with the support of the right, and particularly the far right, who also support, you know, lax gun laws or no gun controls. But let's just run through a couple of statistics. For instance, since 1970, more Americans have died from guns than the sum total of all Americans who died in all wars in the country's history, dating back to the American Revolution. That itself is amazing. Now, on top of that, Gun Violence Archive, which is a pro-gun control site, in the last 9 months, this of course hasn't been updated since the early hours of this morning, but the number of incidents since the beginning of the year, look at that figure there, Laura, 46,479, in which more than 11,565 people were killed.
This year?
This year
2017.
alone.
Wow.
And you hit the nail on the head when you talked about Nevada, because it does have very lenient gun laws. In fact, one of the most lenient states when it comes to gun laws. The fact is you can purchase a gun, but you need a permit when it's a concealed weapon. That there are background checks, but again, if you're selling guns privately, who's there to actually carry out the background check? So how did an individual manage to obtain at least 10, as to the best of their knowledge, rifles, some of which were military assault rifles, which have been banned in the country since the mid-1980s. That itself is another question that needs to be answered. I mean, it is a horrific story, and again, we're very much in the first 24 hours. We'll obviously have to wait and see who this man was and what made him do what he did in the, at the beginning of the day.
As the police say, they cannot, at this stage, get inside the mind of a psychopath, so we'll have to wait and see. Annette, thank you very much indeed. Annette Young there. Well, of course, many people in Las Vegas are still struggling to come to terms with what has happened when a man opened fire from a hotel room armed with, as you just heard, up to 10 guns. Take a listen.
Shock and disbelief as concertgoers fled the scene in Las Vegas when they heard a gunman open fire.
It just kept happening and happening. And there was very short increments where there was breaks in between the shots. But it literally felt like it just continued for 20 minutes straight. And every time there was a break, we ran and we ran. And I still wasn't even sure if it was actually bullets until one of the times we paused, our friend was like, the guy next to us got shot.
Some witnesses said they initially thought the noise was fireworks.
Yeah, I heard it. Boom, 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 boom. And they kept going, even after we left, it just kept going and going. And then Chase and Aldine left the stage, and then everybody started fleeing.
We just heard machine guns, and one of the security guards asked us to just stop. They kept shooting and shooting and shooting, and we thought it was on the other side. We just thought it was maybe play machine guns, but it definitely wasn't, or fire guns.
Security guard.
And it sounded like at least 30 rounds or more.
Many of those attending the Route 91 Country Music Festival fled Las Vegas Boulevard, seeking shelter in nearby casinos and hotels. Police and emergency services were quick to arrive on the scene, and some of those wounded were being treated directly on the ground. Authorities say at least 200 people have been hospitalized due to their injuries.
Well, moving to other news now, and the Catalan leader Carlos Puigdemont is calling for talks with Spain after yesterday's violent police crackdown in the northern region. Hundreds of people were injured trying to vote in an illegal independence referendum where police raided polling stations and used rubber bullets and batons against protesters. Well, the Catalan authorities claim of the 2.2 million people who did manage to cast a ballot, at least 90% voted yes. The European Union has finally broken its silence on the situation and is calling for unity, but has stopped short of criticising the Spanish authorities.
I'm demanding the withdrawal of all police forces moved to Catalonia for these repressive operations, which caused great acts of violence in a country where millions of people have been politically active for years without any incident.
Well, for more on that, I'm joined in the studio by José Manuel Lamarque. He's a journalist at France Inter radio station. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. The day after those terrible scenes that we saw yesterday in northern Spain, Puigdemont says he wants to talk to Madrid. He doesn't want, as he calls it, a traumatic split with Spain. He really seems to have dialed back on the tone that we were hearing a week ago.
Speak about Puigdemont, the president of Catalonia. I think that's, everyone knows what did Mr. Rajoy, which is a big loss for Madrid. And Barcelona now is stronger and won. The possibility for Mr. Puigdemont now is to dissolve the Assembly of Catalonia, go to elections, getting an independent majority, and after getting the independence.
They're citing figures today. They're saying that 90% of people who did manage to vote, 2.2 million people they're claiming, 90% voted yes. Now, those figures, of course, are very, very disputed because of the chaotic nature of the vote. But that would suggest, wouldn't it, that a lot more people have been pushed towards independence compared with the last referendum?
I think that's the point. Maybe yesterday some people wanted to vote to say no to independence, and was a million people that they didn't know what to do or what to think about this. I think the violence that we've seen yesterday in Barcelona turned on the just for the independence and the independent parties, because when you see only people with the voted papers on the street with red carnation in hand, and what did the Spanish Guardia Civil, the fact is, I think that Rajoy, what he did wrong was to send the Guardia Civil, which is not a Catalan police.
These are the riot police with black helmets with the batons.
And we do, the Spanish and the Catalans do remember very well the Guardia Civil during the time of dictator. And it was a really frankest action what they did yesterday.
And it's shocked people around the world, hasn't it? And in Spain as well, you know, police using rubber bullets, using batons, dragging girls by the hair. I mean, we've all seen the pictures. And
that's a real tradition of the Guardia Civil.
Right, but
they didn't change.
Why hasn't the European Union condemned this? This is in the heart of Europe. We've heard nothing, and the EU is usually so quick
Nicola
to
Sturgeon condemned. Nicola Sturgeon.
The EU officials.
Well, the EU now, you know, they are very embarrassed with this sort of things because they have to support a state member, which is Spain, and they don't know how to react now after violences, because yesterday afternoon the vice president of the parliament said, she's Austrian, that she recognized that Madrid was right. And now they don't know what to do, because yesterday evening Mr. Rajoy said nothing happened. Nothing happened. Yes, 800 people injured in Barcelona. That's the problem of the European Union, because they're not used to live these sort of things, you know. And maybe they're not prepared, as for Scotland, to study the possibility to get a region of a country in Europe, getting new member of the European Union. That proves that maybe we have states members now in the European Union, but we have to think that maybe in 20 years we will have some regions will be state members of the European Union.
It's an interesting idea. José Manuel Lamarque, we'll have to leave it there, but thank
you very much.
Now, here in France, the trial of Abdelkader Merah has begun. He's the brother of Mohamed Merah, who went on a 9-day shooting spree in southern France back in March 2012. He killed 3 soldiers and gunned down a teacher and 3 young children at a Jewish school as well, before he was later killed by police. Merah is the first to face trial following a wave of jihadist attacks here in France. Claire Pacquelin-Williams has the latest from court.
This was the first day of the hearings. We're expecting this trial to go on for another 5 weeks. It's taking place here at a special courthouse in Paris, reserved only for serious crimes of drug trafficking and terrorism. Now, there are two men in the dock. The first, Feta Malki, he is accused of having been an associate to Mohamed Merah. He's accused and actually admits to having provided him with a firearm, but says he didn't know what Mohamed Merah was going to do with that weapon. He said he had no idea that he was radicalized. The other man in the dock is Abdelkader Merah. Now, he is Mohamed Merah's older brother. He is actually accused of being an accomplice, of being complicit in the crimes that Mohamed Merah carried out in March 2012. He shot dead 3 soldiers, and he also shot dead 3 children and a teacher at a Jewish school. Now, he denies being complicit. His defense says that he was not an accomplice. One thing that's important to remember is that there were many family members here at the courtroom on this first day of the trial. We spoke to a few of them. I spoke to the mother of a soldier who was shot down, and she said that she was looking for some clarity. She was looking for some answers. She wanted to look Abdelkader Merah in the eye and try and find out the truth as to what happened that day back in March 5.5 years ago. That's something that was very important to her. She said she needed to be here in order to start grieving.